and we are joined by the DDG, Ismail Momoniat. Thank you so much for your time. And first of all, Ismail, I'd like to find out really about reaction that was immediate yesterday, as many felt that the extended reprieve is of a dent, really, in the rising cost of fuel in South Africa. But do tell us, what took so long for a decision to be communicated in this regard?
Yes, I think, it's very important that we act in terms of what the law allows us to do. Now, on the tax side, I mean, what we're doing is we're reducing a tax after the budget process. And every time we do that, aside from what the law says, there's a particular practice. So I think just getting all of those things right certainly took time, because we got to get it right. Otherwise, you can be challenged and legally and so on. And so that was the main reason.
That said, Ismail, do take us into your confidence, really, by expanding on how the final decision was reached to extend this fuel levy relief. Of course, you indicate that there needed to be some sort of due diligence and correct measures taken, which are on a careful side of things. But this decision doesn't come easy, because at the same time, there will be a point where this particular money is recouped from consumers.
Yes, look, it's not easy in the sense that, nobody likes to very few people, I guess, are happy to pay all the taxes that the state imposes on them. I mean, every state imposes taxes. And if you just watch the social media and generally, I mean, people, when they see a particular tax, they just react. They're obviously not going to look at the entire picture and so on. So when we respond, it's quite important to protect the integrity of the tax system. And of course, I don't have to tell you that when we operate in a climate where there's been so much corruption, state capture, and people kind of rightly question whether government is going to use those funds properly, then people are more reluctant to pay. So addressing tax morality is important. So it's about building trust in the state. And of course, when you deal with something as emotive as the fuel levy, people somehow think the state has no right to impose any tax beyond what the price is to purchase the oil. And the three factors that drive the increase, of course, I mean, the two big factors are the fact that Brent crude oil that we buy is actually just rising dramatically after the Russian invasion in Ukraine. Secondly, that your rand-dollar exchange has also, given the turbulence you have in the world, I mean, the rand has weakened considerably. I was hearing the analysts just earlier talk about it. And thirdly, of course, there are a range of taxes on fuel. So the combination of the three has resulted in fuel touching 24 rands and would have touched 25 rands had we not relaxed the fuel levy further for 1 month.
And based on the fact that the fuel in South Africa continues to rise to unaffordable levels for many, is there at this point talk of extending this fuel levy holiday even further?
No, there isn't, because look, what we're doing is that, the fuel is unaffordable, by the way, not just in South Africa, in most countries that import fuel, and even those that produce fuel, I guess, would somehow strive to get to some sort of market-related rate. So, there's hardship all over the world. Clearly, the big issue is events that you see around the world. They are of concern, and I'm not geared to speak on those. But given that the price of fuel is high, everybody has to adjust to this new reality, and one cannot, for example, permanently subsidize high consumption of any product generally. for the moment, what we're doing is we're just monitoring events. And clearly, when you follow, for example, what many institutions are saying, the UN, the IMF, there's concerns about all the disruptions that you see in global supply chains. You're seeing export bans. You're seeing disruptions in the wheat market. The generally food prices are rising. We see a high increasing inflation even in the United States and Europe. So it's almost like, on the one hand, going back to the high inflation of the 1970s. And when you have shocks like on the oil price, and fuel is so central to any economy, that it does have much wider effects all through the economy. And I think dealing with all of those challenges, of course, we've got monetary policy on the one hand. The question is, what's the role of fiscal policy? What's the role of non-fiscal policy? One needs to take all of those measures into account before deciding how we adjust to this new or to smoothen how we adjust to this new reality.
A tricky balance,
of course,
I can imagine.
The big risk that we have is climate change. So, these short-term crises are actually also preventing us from taking action to deal with the real problem we should be dealing with, which is climate change.
Lastly, DDG, we must also talk about what effects this measure is having on the fiscus currently. Earlier, we touched on a point in our lives in South Africa where we will have to recoup those taxes.
Yes, look, we've estimated that this will cost the Treasury about 4.5 billion in lost revenue. But, no budget is ever 100% accurate. It's a projection. And we always sort of update our projections 6 or 7 months after the budget, when we do the medium-term budget policy statement in October. And that's the time where we would do this. With so much uncertainty, I mean, it's not just all negative news. It's negative on oil, but for example, South Africa exports, there could be positive news on the export side. There could be other positive news, and we're also sort of talking to the Strategic Fuel Fund and others to try and see if we can't sell more of our strategic fuel. So, I think we believe that let's wait till October and then assess, because we do think that some of the revenue loss we'd be able to recover from other areas without cutting expenditure or borrowing more, by the way, without changing the fiscal framework.